Terry? Question. You familiar with the Khan Academy?
Yes.
Would you comment on what they do?
Well, I think the guy is fantastic, for one. What he does is he does little lectures, little YouTube-type lectures on different subjects. The Khan Academy now has, several thousand modules that allow kids to take classes, essentially, on algebra, calculus, biology, all kinds of different subjects. There are schools, for example, in Los Altos that are using his materials as part of their regular curriculum now. It's extremely exciting. But what I would add is, this is just one way of doing online education. These are little videos that people can watch, right? But there are also software programs that don't involve those kinds of videos at all, that sort of march you through the material, that don't involve lectures. Or you can have online courses where a professor actually stands up there, you can watch him, and he might lecture on the Civil War or something like that. And then you might have readings, that are actually discussed with other students online in the class. There are so many different ways of doing this. Khan is doing it in one particular way. He's become famous doing this. But I don't think we should become wedded to that particular way. It's just one part of an overall sort of kaleidoscopic approach that I think ultimately will prove successful down the road. And also different people learn well with different kinds of approaches, different people who have different learning styles. So we'll just see how this develops long term.
Thank you. Gloria Romero. Hispanic students comprise 50% of the California schools. They are our future, and many are not graduating or are doing poorly. How would you help these students succeed?
I think the first thing is to never have the soft bigotry of low expectations, which I find too often when many folks say that, it's those kids or they are English language learners, etc. I think we have to believe that every child can learn, and that's the mission of the public education system. So what I would do is, of course, number one, make sure that there is a quality teacher in that classroom, one who's evaluated, one who is, of course, prepared in the subject matter for teaching, one who is accountable. I think that's very important in terms of the teacher. I think parents having options, having choice to be able to move their child, irrespective of what my zip code happens to be. We expect the responsibility in holding the level of performance high for students and their parents, but matching it with the opportunity for parents to truly choose the best education environment for them. If you give kids a thriving education experience, they will thrive.
Vogel. Will there ever be consideration of a year-round school to utilize the facilities more efficiently?
I think year-round schools, it's an idea that's been around for a while, and we certainly have no objection to it. In fact, think that it is, like you said, a very good way to maximize facility use.
Larry Sand, how did you get started in discussing these issues after you retired from teaching?
Well, actually, I really got into this when I was still teaching. It was certain things are starting to get to me. I thought a pretty good teacher, and I just went to work every day like most other teachers do. But the big thing for me was in 2005, Prop 75. It was one of Arnold's initiatives, some of you might remember, and this would have made the political dues the political party union dues would be an opt-in situation. The way it was, and unfortunately the way it still is that you are automatically paying the political party dues, and you have to go through certain hoops to get out of paying that. And I think that's really wrong and frankly very un-American. And it really, really bothered me. And frankly, CTA mounted a massive campaign in 2005 to make sure Prop 75 didn't come to life. They mortgaged their building. They raised teachers' dues, $60 a year over a 3-year period. Anyway, I found that whole campaign very distasteful, and that was sort of really my first step in the reform world.
Gloria Romero, you said schools are the reason that the prisons are full, that schools failed them. What about the families who aren't being held accountable for what they do in the parenting?
I believe in personal responsibility, absolutely. But if we have responsibility, we need to give rights. And that's why I'm so adamant about providing rights for parents. I'm the first who will argue in personal responsibility, holding a high bar, but I don't think we should be afraid of making sure that our parents have the rights to do the right thing for their children. Once again, if we educate, we are much less likely to incarcerate.
Dean Vogel, what percentage of the CTA dues go towards political activities and campaigns? And are 100% of the teachers Republicans or Democrats?
The political breakout goes something like this. $36 per member goes into a fund that we call the Initiative Fund, and that money can be used only to support or oppose an initiative. There is $8 per year that goes into what we call the Candidates PAC, and that's the money that is used, the aggregate of that used to contribute to candidates for assembly or statewide office or school board, such and such. I think the breakdown Republican and Democrat in our membership is roughly, 35% Republican, 55%, 65%, 65-35. I think is a pretty good breakdown.
Is that the same percentage of the donations to campaigns?
No, the donations to campaigns are made by the policy body of CTA, which is about an 800-member democratically elected body that meets 4 times a year. And the candidates are interviewed locally by teachers and local association leaders locally, and then recommendations are made to the state council. And without the vote of state council, which is a 60% threshold, candidates can't get the money.
Thank you. Terry Moe, can computers make up for poor family atmosphere?
Well, I think the place to start is by recognizing that families are the single biggest influence on how much kids learn. And it's just a fact. And for some families, this is a very good thing, and for other families, this is a very bad thing. So for many disadvantaged kids, it makes their lives difficult. It makes their educational lives difficult. And I think that if we could design an education system that worked best, we would try to design it with that in mind, right? So number one, I think computers can overcome some of the disadvantages of family background when there are disadvantages. Because all kids are treated equally on the computer, and there's so much that kids can learn from the computer. But still, there are real disadvantages at home if parents don't have books in the home, if they don't read to the child, and so on. And so, personally, you might disagree with this, but I think it's important for the government somehow to have liaisons that can work with families, that can help families know what to do, that can jump in and do something because some percentage of parents are deadbeats. Many kids don't have parents. They have guardians or whatever, grandparents. And, we don't like to hear this. Because basically what I think is that we should let parents choose where their kids go to school, and parents should have a major role in education. However, we can't be Pollyannas about this. We have to face up to the fact that a certain percentage of kids are burdened by parents who are not doing a good job. So I think online learning can really help compensate for some of those disadvantages, but I think that there are some other things that we as a society have to think about doing to try to boost the parental side of the equation for some of these kids.
If anybody can handle this one. Why cannot we teach more of the U.S. Constitution in our schools? Anybody want to talk about it?
Well, I'll just say that, the U.S. Constitution is the backbone of our country, and what I would expect from schools is that they're addressing teaching of the Constitution the same way they're addressing, teaching of anything else, reading, math, and etc. But one of the things you need to understand that is pervasive to the degree that we keep expanding the use and dependence upon high-stakes standardized testing, the pieces of the curriculum continues to narrow. It's one of the primary objections of teachers. I just spent 8 days in Finland in August looking at their system. They don't do high-stakes standardized testing. Singapore, they don't do high-stakes standardized testing. South Korea, they don't do high-stakes standardized testing. All the stuff that we're preoccupied with doing to improve public education, all of the countries we're comparing ourselves to stopped doing it because it cost too much money and it didn't give teachers the data they needed to differentiate instruction.
I would like to address that also. I was, for most of my teaching career, I taught 8th grade American history, and I certainly taught the Constitution. And yes, there are questions on the test about the Constitution. This isn't a testing issue. If a teacher's not teaching it, he or she is not doing their job. I think clearly most teachers do teach this. It's part of the 8th grade curriculum, period.
Anybody else? Okay. Gloria, what, if any, educational options are offered in the California juvenile system, detention facilities, etc.?
Well, not enough. The juvenile justice system is rapidly expanding. When I served in the legislature leading in 2010, the average provision, the average cost to incarcerate a juvenile in the prison system, over $200,000 a year. Over $200,000 a year. I remember the very first time I visited a juvenile facility in Southern California, I saw a cage. And it looked like a phone booth. No Clark Kent nearby, but it looked like a phone booth. And I remember asking the warden that I was with, what is that? They turned to me and the warden said, that's a classroom. And I looked at the warden and the guards and I said, I'm a teacher. I've been in a classroom for decades. That is not a classroom. So I think when we take a look at opportunities, we find that whole juvenile justice system, we're talking about education reform. Prisons are the flip side of the same coin. The whole entire prison system needs to be reformed and changed and altered to provide more meaningful and education opportunities for kids. But many of these kids in the system did something wrong. They're there, personally responsible, but many of them began to reflect saying, you know what, I wish I would have learned to read earlier. I wish this. Some of them were getting their first chance, but not enough. These were kids, I do believe, eternal optimists. You're an optimist, I'm an optimist. I do believe that we need to provide pathways to get out of that juvenile system, but until we deal with the front end of changing, transforming public education in California, we are always going to be stuck with the remnants of what happens when you have a failed system, a juvenile justice system and a prison system that is growing and growing and growing.
Thank you. Dean Vogel, this is, I'm going to read what is here because it just comes from the person. I am currently a high school student. My math teacher, a genuinely nice person, is a terrible teacher. A lot of his kids don't learn and fail the class. If there was a teacher like him in every classroom, the school might be considered a failing school. Do you think he should receive more pay to teach more kids who don't learn?
I think teachers that cannot do the work in a classroom and are unqualified to be teaching shouldn't be in the classroom. They should not be teaching. And part of the problem we have is is we have a system for inducting teachers, and we have a system for evaluating teachers that's broken. And until we deal with the root problem, which is you've got to have a quality teacher in every classroom, until we deal with that in a realistic, pragmatic way, we're going to be continually fighting the same battle.
Larry Sand. A few years ago, I did a statistical analysis of school spending and student performance, and I found that there's a strong inverse relationship between results and money spent. How do you deal with that? What do you say?
So I assume you're saying that whatever study was done showed that the more money you spent, the poorer the results?
That's what it says. That's what it says.
Okay, well, I can't really speak to that specific situation, but as I tried to stress before, money is not the answer, and if you have a bad situation, paying teachers more or throwing more money at a bad situation is not going to improve it. We need to change laws, which we've all talked about. We need to change other things, because once again, just throwing money it's wasting it.
This I guess is for Dean Vogel. Why does the teachers union never complain about illegal aliens when they complain about overcrowded classrooms?
I don't know that it's accurate to say that the association never complains about illegal aliens. I think that anybody who's ever been in a classroom with way too many kids in it understands why the association on behalf of teachers would be complaining. Think about it. Current statute in the state of California, the law in the state of California says classrooms between kindergarten and third grade should have a ratio of 1 teacher and 20 students. And by the way, average class size in states like Massachusetts and Connecticut, where we're continually compared to, is 1 to 12 and 1 to 15. And if you want to make class sizes manageable, guess what it's going to take? Money. Oh, there you go again, throwing money at the problem. You'd like to have kindergartens with 20 kids in it, but your kindergartens all have 38? You want to have 20 in each class? You're going to have to pay. You know, so this idea that just this blanket statement that you can't throw money at the problem, we need to be thoughtful when we think about that. Because some of the problems that we face demand money.
Thank you. As far as any of the former teachers might address this, or Dean Vogel, what is your opinion regarding teachers who are openly inserting their own political views or agendas into their classes, indoctrinating our kids with narratives instead of teaching history? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, this is clearly despicable. I think my mic. Sorry. I think it's despicable that any teacher would do that. The teacher has no right to do that. The teacher should be there teaching objectively. Clearly, I'm to the right of center, though my students never do that, because I never let my personal politics come into play in the classroom.
If I might interrupt, let it be noted that Dean Vogel and Larry Sand agree 100% on this issue. It is absolutely inappropriate for a teacher in an instructional setting in front of kids to be proselytizing politically. It's just wrong.
Thank you.
So how do you deal with that teacher?
What's wrong with the sound system?
How do you deal with that teacher?
Is also fixed.
How do you deal with that teacher? I would be talking to the teacher supervisor and saying this is inappropriate and I want something done.
We're going to take questions from Mr. Chino, please, not from the floor.
Okay, if Terry Moe, if rocket ship is so great, why is it the founder's child is it in a public school? Also, at least one board member's child is also in public school. Rocket ship.
Well, I don't know anything about their decisions about where they send their kids to school, and I don't want to justify what they do. I don't even know them. I think what's important is what has Rocket Ship done for these children who do attend the school. I mean, their option was to go to a regular public school in San Jose. And because Rocket Ship is there, I didn't even get a chance to talk about Rocket Ship, but it's just an amazing thing. What they do is they have the kids on computers for about 3 hours a day, doing reading and math. The rest of the time they're in regular classrooms and they have music and art and all the normal stuff. But because they spend those 3 hours on the computer learning quite well, the school saves $500,000 a year, and it uses that money to pay for tutors for children who are not learning as well as they should. Lots of times these tutors are Stanford students. They're not paid very much. And so this just is a different model for running a school. And by using their money in this way, this is another example of how you spend money. Right? They're spending it in an unorthodox way that is tailored to the needs of these children and taking advantage of technology. And these kids are scoring off the charts. So this is what really matters. How is Rocket Ship making a difference in the lives of these disadvantaged kids? And I don't really care where the board members send their business.
Gloria Romero, how much money is the right amount to be spending on education? Because we constantly get more and more requests almost every election for bonds and et cetera, et cetera. What is the right amount that's going to make it work?
Well, the right amount for whom? I don't know that.
Students, educate the students.
I don't know that there is a right dollar amount. It is difficult to try to ascertain. It does take more dollars to educate high poverty children. I mean, we know that. I think it's one where, though, to me, the question is not so much what the number is, but what is the accountability and the output of that dollar that's invested. I think if we keep having an argument about money, 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 we're going to lose the bigger picture of what's the outcome, what are we getting, what's the bang for the buck. And we can find different districts, side-by-side schools, side-by-side a charter school and a traditional, perhaps neighborhood school with the same amount of money with very different outcomes. So I think we've got to look first at trying to nail down what are the outcomes we want to achieve, and that's why I do think testing is important. Not nonstop, but testing, what testing gave us and why I think the CTEN is so afraid of this is that testing basically opened up the books. It showed us the numbers. And it began to especially show us the very disparate impacts of children in California schools with very different outcomes, and basically opened our eyes. That was a Bush-Kennedy law, no child left behind. Imperfect, but needed. Numbers matter. So in terms of the dollars, we can figure it out, but I think if we keep having that argument of how much, we're going to lose the bigger picture of what's the outcome, and that's where I'm going to focus. But having said that, I am going to have to excuse myself. I have got to get back to Los Angeles this evening. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to come and participate, the panelists as well. It's been an interesting conversation, and I really do hope that we get a chance to have further conversation as we go forward. So thank you very much for allowing me.
Thank you, Gloria. And since I have to take you to the airport, I'm going to turn this over to Howard Myers.
Try carefully. Okay, if the audience and the panel are still interested in continuing, we can do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like you're in favor of it. Next question is for Dean. What process would you recommend to fire a bad teacher?
I think one of the things we've got to look at first is the way we evaluate. And right now the system is broken because the teacher is evaluated typically by the building administrator. People who are familiar with the dynamics of teaching and learning understand that it takes a number of observations to really get a sense of what's going on in the classroom. And right now you've got administrators that have, because of the downturn in the economy, you have school sites where you might have had a principal and a couple of vice principals evaluating a faculty of 75, and now you've got one person having to do that on top of everything else. And here I'm speaking about I'm on the administrator side right here. They don't have the time to get it done. What we ought to do, like in a perfect world, if you can't do the work, you shouldn't be in the classroom. But for crying out loud, I heard one of my colleagues up here say, you got to lay somebody off, and so you leave the experienced guy and you lay off the brand new, energetic, fabulous teacher, or something to that effect. I don't know about you all, and I don't know about the work you're doing, but I know when I was a first-year teacher, I wasn't nearly as effective as I was when I was in my 5th year, and when I was in my 5th year, I was not nearly as good as I was when I was in my 10th year. And, it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing, experience matters. And so we have got to have a way of looking at the work that teachers do, taking test data as part of that. I'm not one of those anti-test data guys, but it's a very, very comprehensive, complex skill teaching. And to simplify it by looking at a value-added measure that you don't even see for 3 months after your class leaves is really a bad idea. We need a lot of work on teacher evaluation.
Was that answering the question about what process would fire a bad teacher?
Well, I mean,
Thank you.
here's the existing process is this. You go before a competency panel that is an administrative law judge and a couple other teachers. Think about jury of your peers. You're a 3rd grade teacher. You're going to have 2 other 3rd grade teachers who don't know you, who don't work in your district, who don't even live near you, and an administrative law judge listening to your administrator make a presentation about how you're not doing the job. And then you're going to have the opportunity to say what you believe is right, and that panel's going to make a decision. The problem we have is it takes too long, and it costs too much money, and that process needs to be shortened.
Thank you. All of us here agree that 2 things our schools should encourage are learning and creativity and independent thinking. What are the reformers doing to encourage this? I guess this was, I'm not sure if this is addressed to all or Vogel. Anybody wants to grab that, I'll have at it. If you want, I can rephrase it or reread it. We agree that 2 things our schools should encourage learning are creativity and independent thinking. What are the reformers doing to encourage this? How about there?
So I really don't know how to answer the question. I think it varies from school to school, district to district. I'm sorry, I really don't answer the question.
I guess, okay, it may not be a very, very clearly phrased question.
Let's make this the last one. We're getting close to.
Okay. One last one is addressed to Terry Moe. What is the main inhibitor in education moving towards a system that will effectively educate students?
Well, let me give a somewhat deeper answer than the one you're expecting, although it's actually the same answer. Look, the schools are government agencies. They just are. And teachers are government employees. So virtually everything about the schools is subject to the political process, right? All the fundamental decisions are ultimately made in politics, or they can be made in politics. And how do decisions get made in politics? Well, they're driven by power and by groups that have power. And in education, the most powerful groups by far are the teachers' unions. And that doesn't mean they can have everything they want. Sometimes they lose. In many cases, they don't get what they want, they just block, right? Which, makes reform impossible. And their interests are in jobs And those interests are not the same as the interests of children. And so what we have then is a social dilemma where the process by which we're making decisions guarantees that the ways that schools get organized, which is done through politics, is not compatible with the kind of organization we need to educate children as well as they can be educated. That is the answer.
All of you for coming and making this possible, as well as our panelists. Thank you very much. Also, Larry Sand has some brochures at what's left of the check-in table, as I understand anyway, so if you want to find out more about his organization, California Teachers Empowerment Network, these brochures will be available at the end. There they are, over there at this check-in table, what's left of them. Thank you very much.